The Raiders are in panic mode. The Raiders franchise, the Raiders fans, and the Raiders players that are already in the locker room, you will lose them should the Raiders trade the first overall pick. Now, you might as well ask the question, should the Raiders trade the rights to Fernando Mendoza? Because whoever does trade for the first pick is taking Fernando Mendoza if the Raiders decide to go that direction. Now, look, there's reasons why to do this and why not to do this, right? I'm going to start with the why you don't do this. The Raiders are in panic mode. The Raiders franchise, the Raiders fans, and the Raiders players that are already in the locker room, you will lose them if you decide not to draft Fernando Mendoza. And I don't think that that's an exaggeration at all. Fernando Mendoza has a very, very obvious comp to me, and it's Jared Goff. He's a little more mobile than Jared Goff, which helps a lot, which is very promising. Now, what I will say is the upside to trading the first overall pick is greater than the upside of the player that Fernando Mendoza can become, in my opinion. And we'll get into that why in a second. But you make this pick and you don't think twice because, one, you brought in Clint Kubiak, who's an offensive genius. You have Tom Brady as a part of the organization who, from what I'm hearing, really believes that he can get hands-on with Fernando Mendoza and mold him into the quarterback of the Raiders' dreams. The Raiders have not had a quarterback in who knows how long. And like I said, you make this pick because you can't afford to lose your fan base another year. You can't afford to displease the guys in the locker room because what happens when you pass on this pick is the guys in the locker room are going to say they don't believe in this team. They don't believe that we're ready to get a franchise quarterback in the building. They don't believe that we can go out and compete. They don't believe that we have a strong enough of a supporting cast to ensure that Fernando Mendoza has a successful NFL career. So that's why you make the pick, right? You don't. I don't think Fernando Mendoza is a generational prospect, but he is a hell of a prospect. And the gap from Fernando Mendoza to the second best quarterback in the draft, which we'll talk about a little bit later in today's show, it's massive. You could drive an 18-wheeler through the gap between Fernando Mendoza and the next best quarterback in this draft. Now, to the argument of why you trade the pick, this 2027 class, if you were to wait this out and pass on Fernando and trade him for a haul of picks, you got a shot at Dante Moore. You got a shot at Arch Manning. It is a loaded draft class. And I just don't think the Raiders have that time, unfortunately. But history tells us that you trade the pick. And this is why. The 2023 draft was the prime example of why you do it. The Panthers traded for the first overall pick, and they got Bryce Young. And look what the Bears got. A potential generational quarterback in Caleb Williams, Tyreek Stevenson, who's a great defensive back, offensive tackle Darnell Wright, wide receiver DJ Moore, and then they have another second-round pick that they could do whatever they want with. And that changed the Bears organization in one trade. It altered the trajectory of the Chicago Bears and is considered one of the best trades in NFL history. So that is why you trade the pick. Will they? No chance. There is no chance the Raiders do it. And Clint Kubiak came out recently and they asked him about Fernando Mendoza, and he said he's great, he's smart, we'll see where he ends up. Now, I'm not buying too much into that. A lot of people were freaking out on Twitter saying, oh, there's a chance they pass up on him. Obviously, guys, Clint Kubiak can't come out and say, yeah, we're taking that guy 100%. You got to throw a little bit of it, even though it's obvious the Raiders are taking him first overall, there has to be somewhat of a smokescreen still. You can't just show the entire league your hand. So I don't buy too much into that quote, but there's pros and cons to it, of course. Somebody told me, You make this pick, you're the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow. The Raiders become the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow, a quarterback and not enough around him to make real things shake. You trade the pick, you alter your franchise forever, which is what the Chicago Bears did in the graphic we just displayed on the screen. It altered their franchise for the better forever. Why? Because they had patience. They didn't think that CJ Stroud, they didn't think that Bryce Young were going to be game changers. And they waited out, and it ended up resulting in Caleb Williams. So while there's a lot of luck involved in that whole ordeal of them getting a pick from a team that the Panthers that are as bad as the Panthers, and it just so happens to be that they end up with the first overall pick and Caleb Williams falls right into their lap, right? But the Bears spent the year that they waited out on getting a quarterback, they spent it on the supporting cast. They spent it on building up the supporting cast to ensure that when the next draft came along and they have this high pick, that they were ready for a quarterback like Caleb Williams to come into their franchise and thrive. So history tells you, trade out the first overall pick. But we all know, I know, you know, the Raiders know, Tom Brady knows, you cannot pass up on drafting Fernando Mendoza. You cannot. The Raiders have not got quarterback right ever. And now they have a chance with the best quarterback of all time kind of running the show. You bring him in. This is not like bringing in a Lamar Jackson mold of a player and having Tom Brady trying to coach him up and talking and get in his ear. Fernando Mendoza's game is a lot like Brady's. It's all up here. It's all up here. And I think that you take Fernando Mendoza. History says you trade the pick. But like I said, the Raiders do not have any time left, really. And I'm not saying that Clint Kubiak's going to come in and be on the hot seat. No, they're going to give him time. They're going to give him multiple years to get this thing right, get this thing off the ground. But what you don't do is piss off the guys in the locker room. What you don't do is piss off the fan base, which they have done plenty of already in their time. So, yeah, history tells you yes, but the heart and the locker room and the fan base and the franchise and the situation and the prospect at hand and the weak draft tell you take Fernando Mendoza. Nothing's guaranteed when it comes to drafting quarterbacks, but in my opinion, Fernando Mendoza, we don't know his ceiling, but I have a very strong feeling that Fernando Mendoza's floor is a lot higher than most prospects in recent time. So you take the guy who's there, the best quarterback in the draft by far, and you get this thing going for your franchise because they deserve it, the fans deserve it, and the players in the locker room deserve it. Now, look, we don't know what they're going to do with Max Crosby. Max Crosby says he wants out. Even if he does want out, it's not the end of the world. Yes, you lose a veteran presence. You lose a guy who kind of shows you the Raider way, shows the young players an example of what work ethic looks like. But it's not at the end of the world if you let him go. You free up cap. You get a haul of picks, because I'm telling you, you trade Max Crosby, there's going to be some more first-round picks, and now you're really cooking. So if I am the Raiders, I make the pick.